Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again as we get started on this lesson on setting up autoscaling. Our lesson topics are going to include our launch configurations, autoscaling groups, autoscaling metrics and thresholds, and autoscaling alarms and SNS triggers. So we've got a lot to cover in this lesson, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the steps required to create a launch configuration. You'll find your launch configuration under EC2. So if you go to Compute and go under EC2, then in the menu on the left, if you scroll down, you'll see the autoscaling section. Go ahead and select Launch Configurations. So when creating a launch configuration, you'll need to set up a couple of different things. One, we'll need to actually select the AMI that we'll use with this launch configuration. The AMI features the image that will load on your EC2 instance when autoscaling triggers a scaling event. So let's go ahead and click Create Launch Configuration. We're going to select this Linux AMI 2018.0.3.0, and we're going to leave T2 Micro selected. Now we need to assign a name to our launch configuration. So I gave it the name Essentials Launch Configuration. And then we don't need to select anything under IAM role or detailed monitoring with CloudWatch. We're going to expand advanced details. And in this user data section, we need to install Apache so that our web server will be set up for us. So I've pasted in a bash script, and we've used this bash script before. It does a yum update to ensure the packages are updated on the Linux instance. Then we install Apache and we start the Apache service. These are the minimum things that we need in order to get our web server up and running. Now, the next thing we'll need to do is make sure that we select assign a public IP address to every instance. Once that's all set, go ahead and click Next to add storage. We're not going to add any additional storage to these, so we're going to click Next to configure the security group. Now, we'll need to make sure that we select the appropriate security group. We specifically need to make sure that port 80 web traffic can get to our EC2 instances. So we're going to go ahead and select our Essentials security group. It allows port 80. It also allows SSH and all of our other ports as well. Go ahead and click Review. And notice it's warning you that our security group is open to the world. Again, that's fine. We're just using this for practice purposes. So we're going to go ahead and click Create Launch Configuration. So you also need to make sure you have your key pair that we previously downloaded. If you're following along, you're going to need to make sure you have access to the key pair that's listed. And if you haven't previously downloaded a key pair, then you'll need to just go through and select Create a new key pair. I still have my Essentials key pair, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that selected. I'm going to check the box to acknowledge that I still have access to that key pair and click Create Launch Configuration. If you were to launch these EC2 instances and you don't have access to that key pair, you would not be able to log into the instance. So make sure that you do have access to the key pair. All right, so I'm going to click the Create Launch Configuration now. So our launch configuration has been created. So creating the launch configuration is only the first step. So we're going to go ahead and click Create an autoscaling group using this launch configuration. Now we need to go ahead and give our autoscaling group a name, Essentials ASG for Essentials Autoscaling Group. We're going to start with one instance, and then we're going to make sure that we have the correct VPC selected. And we are using the default VPC. Then we're going to go ahead and select our subnets. So the subnets that we're going to use are going to be our public subnets, which are 1B and 1F. Once we have our subnets selected, we check the box next to receive traffic from our load balancer, and then notice that we've got target groups here. Here is where we would select our Essentials target group. So what this does is it allows our load balancer to be used with our autoscaling group. What type of health check do we want? We're going to leave it on a health check on EC2. And notice that it tells you that EC2 detailed monitoring metrics are at 1 minute frequency, and detailed monitoring is not enabled for this launch configuration. So as a result, it's going to use basic monitoring. Detailed monitoring, because it has that 1 minute interval, would actually incur charges on the AWS account. So be aware of that as you're setting up your monitoring settings in CloudWatch. Our health check grace period is 300 seconds, and we can increase or decrease that as desired. The grace period sets the number of seconds that an instance can fail the health check without being terminated or replaced. So notice it says that we need a role so that our autoscaling group can access our EC2 instances. So I'm going to go ahead and leave everything at the default, and then I'm going to go ahead and click next. So notice it says that we need a role so that our autoscaling group can access our EC2 instances. So I'm going to go ahead and leave everything at the default, and then I'm going to go ahead and click next. We're going to go to our autoscaling policies, and we're going to select use scaling policies to adjust the size of our group. So we're going to scale between 1 and 3 instances. So this is going to be the minimum and maximum number of instances that are in our autoscaling group. We need to set a name on our scale group size settings and set the metric that we want to use to determine when EC2 should add additional instances. Average CPU utilization is one of the most common metrics. So we're going to go ahead and leave it at that metric. For target, we're going to set that target value to 80. So if the CPU utilization reaches 80, then a new EC2 instance would be created up to a maximum of 3. Now, the number of seconds for warm-up, what this does is it ensures that the autoscaling group waits at least 300 seconds or whatever number of seconds that you specify so that it doesn't trigger another EC2 instance to be launched, have it start shutting down the instance before it's completely booted and all of the settings from the bash script are complete. So now that we have that set, we're going to go to configure notifications so we can select an SNS topic, and there's our essentials autoscaling group. So anytime a new instance is launched, terminated, fails to launch, or fails to terminate, then our SNS topic will be kicked off. I'm going to go ahead and click next. You can add tags if you like, and then hit review. Make sure everything looks good, and then we're going to click create autoscaling group. So we got an error on our scaling policies. Let's hit retry. All right, so now it's successfully created. So we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and click close. And then here are the details associated with our autoscaling group. So now let's go ahead and go over here to instances. And notice we have an instance that's been provisioned in our autoscaling group, and it's in availability zone 1B. So let's go ahead and take a look at our requirements from Project Omega. So our requirement was to automate the process of scaling up or scaling down AWS resources based on traffic demand. The requirement was to have a launch configuration and autoscaling group set up to provision EC2 instances based on traffic demand, and also to have an autoscaling group enabled that will trigger an SNS topic when instances are added or terminated from the autoscaling group. And we walked through the process of creating our autoscaling group, and we configured our SNS notification, and we configured our autoscaling group to use our elastic load balancer target group. So that concludes this lesson on autoscaling. I want to thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.